Hey guys, as we always get when we do a video like can you live comfortably for a family of four on $2,500, here in Nicaragua, we're going to get a bunch of kind of crazy responses. Now, we know this is going to happen because the question itself, we already knew, was a setup from a troll who wanted to prompt because he thought I couldn't do a budget for it. We did a budget easily because everyone jumped in and when he initially asked the question, and we're like, we all live below this really comfortably. What are you talking about? This isn't a question to ask. This is yeah, I want to see a budget of someone who's actually doing it kind of thing. Sure, makes sense. But to claim that people aren't doing it when loads of people are doing it every day and they're on the channel talking about it is kind of crazy and clearly was not an honest attempt to see about a budget. But there's a couple things here that I think are important. One, we're going to break down some of the tricks he's trying to use. And we also want to point out a few things to look for as we go through this. I've read some of it, but I haven't read all of it yet, and the comments are still coming in. I get my best responses when I do this right away. One, this guy is clearly an American and targeting Americans. So if you're a Canadian or European or anywhere else in the world, and you're hearing the things he says, most of them are not going to make sense. You're going to think he sounds crazy because he's using Americanisms to try to invoke fear or a irrational response based on the way that things are commonly in the United States. I'll point him out as best as I can as we go, but there's going to be some things like he doesn't believe that you can live comfortably and not own a car and have to use public transportation only in the United States. Would that broadly be something that the average person might, if they've never traveled and have no experience of the world and aren't like researching, could easily believe? Maybe Canadians, but Canadians mostly see more of the world, and a lot of Canadians by percentage live in places with public transportation that is quite excellent. So even Canadians, very unlikely to fall for this. Of course, New York City residents, not going to fall for this. Americans who live on the Canadian border, not going to fall for this. Americans who travel, not going to fall for this. But the majority of Americans, this would be an effective tactic. So look for these things as we go, whether something is actually his attempt to come up with a misunderstanding or if it's specifically attempting to invoke an emotional response to where Americans would not rationally look at something and assume that because something is a problem in the United States, it must therefore be a problem somewhere else. Look for these things in like healthcare or education or transportation areas specifically. They're likely places where we're going to get problems. We're going to read through his stuff and break it down as we go because he's trying to trick you. Now, of course, we know that the government in the US pays for a lot of people to do things. And this is another thing, right as we start. Watch out anytime someone starts off with, hey, you must be getting paid. This is a standard trained tactic that is used. Bots will do this for free, right? They'll start with that because it's a very easy way to put people on the back foot. And most people are not going to stop and think critically. Oh, are we talking about the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere? And you think that they are paying high-cost social media influencers to talk to a very small audience? No offense, it's an amazing audience for what we have. You guys are the best. But you're not actually that numerous, not in reality, to try to, for what end? To convince people to live here really cheaply? That makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't make sense for a government to want to do that. It doesn't make sense that a government that's number one challenge is employment and income to throw money at that. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But it's a common tactic when you don't have any rational reason to explain why your information is wrong. Instead of rationalizing or showing facts, you go for what's known as an ad hominem, trying to attack the person rather than attacking what he's saying. So what he's saying is, in theory, he's going to propose that maybe someone is incentivizing me to give you facts and information that are backed up by loads of people that anyone can come and easily check on their own or just use basic math and research and figure out are true anyway. It just takes more work. But if you want to fact check it, very easy to do. Instead of attacking that fact and saying, I don't think it's true, instead he's saying, no, the person who's saying it can't be trusted, but not for a reason that he can say just, well, I suppose maybe this incredibly irrational thing might be happening. So let's start right away reading his first post, because he has several, and see what he has to say about a budget of $3,500 broken down for just a family of four. That's 2 adults, 2 kids here in Nicaragua, which literally, we have so many people in this community are on budgets just like this. This is a really normal, reasonable budget, and already people are hopping in. $3,500, you can live like a king in Nicaragua for this. While he's saying that's not even, you can't even do it. So it's such a unbelievable disparity between what people are actually living and what he says you would need to qualify for. And of course, he went for comfort, so he moves the bar, right? Well, what normal people consider comfort isn't comfort. You have to have, and he comes up with these really wild things, which we'll see as we go. Before we start reading, I am going to do my best to translate into full English. Someone on the Expats group, which if you have not joined, definitely hop into the Expats of Nicaragua WhatsApp group. Link is in the show notes. Anything you need for information about this show or getting information, check the show notes. Also, always feel free to hop into the comments and comment and whatever. But someone already pointed out that his English, his screen name is Philly Ray to make it sound like he's from the American South, but the way that he's speaking, someone pointed out, sounds like he's in a bot farm in South Asia where the English is a little bit more challenged, and there are some patterns there that fit that. So let's read. Scott, if you don't get paid by the government for your Homer videos, I'm not sure what that means, you should. Right there, we start with if you're not getting paid by the government. Now, he couches it. Oh, in case you're not, you should, because you do such a great job for them. Okay, if exposing what it's like to live here is doing good things for the government, then you're certainly super pro Nicaraguan government. That's cool. We're not supposed to get political in the comments, but we'll let it slide. But that was a huge, he's all about the government. Remember, we don't care what the government is. We just like the country and how it works. Their government is their own business, not ours. But he's a little bit excited about it, but okay. But if I were them, I'd require you to not be so obviously ridiculous in your takes. Ha 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 ha! You have to, that's what he writes. Okay, so medical and school is a luxury? Yes, this is part of my point, Philly Ray, is that things that in the United States are considered things you have to pay for. Now, I went to school in the United States. I did not have to pay for school. We did, when I was younger, we paid for private school. It was not a good experience. I went to public school when I was older. It was a great experience. You do not have to pay for school in the United States. As an American who moves to Nicaragua, you also do not have to pay for school in Nicaragua, and you do not have to pay for school from the United States. You can continue to go to school in the United States for free when you're in Nicaragua. You may also go to school in Nicaragua for free. You can also homeschool for free or for a small fee. You can also pay for private tutors or for private school. Marcela from my show does pay for private school. It is insanely cheap, to the tune of something like $200 or $300 per semester per child, which is not nothing, but it's also a very small budget. Remember, Nicaraguans who make less than $1,000 per year send their kids to private school here, and some of the best, right? So that's where these budgets are. Trying to make it sound like it would be expensive, like the United States, that you would need these things, like in the United States, makes no sense. Anyone who's thinking critically about Nicaragua wouldn't even need to ask me this, because obviously, if you know anything about American American education, you know that it extends to students of Americans living abroad. Most countries do, so if you're Canadian, I expect you have Canadian resources when living abroad and so forth. But for the Americans specifically, yes, you absolutely get to keep going to public school for free, even when you live abroad, at least from many states. So there's no possibility of trying to say that you have to pay for school for it to be comfortable or functional. He's basically saying that the only thing that he will accept is an expensive private school, because he's designated that private and expensive are the only things he would consider a luxury. Those are things that my kids here in Nicaragua, I will not let them do. We want them to have a better education, and with more flexibility, better hours, and so forth. We don't want them going to a private school and getting a lower one. Everyone has different needs. Their kids are different. Everyone has a different reason for doing what they do. But I know what the real budgets are for real kids here, because I help with kids who do go to private school here. I know kids who go to public school here. I have kids who can go to public school here and public in the U.S. and do private homeschool mix with going to in the U.S. And yeah, it's not completely free for us. It is really cheap. Okay. Being hyperbolic and saying it's private to say it's luxury isn't accurate, because it's not private in America for the same service. Let's be real clear. In America, all healthcare is private. It is also all public, right? But you have to pay for it. It is not public in the way that the world considers healthcare to be public. There are private companies always involved. The VA could be different, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about for normal people. So America is always private. So no matter what service you're getting in the United States, it is private, just to be clear. It's because he's a little bit confused here. Here you have options, so it's important to understand how those options come together to be more luxurious than you could get in the United States. And that's all that really matters, right? We don't need to define luxury as something completely impossible to achieve, because he's clearly trying to sell something as a guide for luxury. But he has a moving bar here, so watch for that. He's going to keep moving the bar. When we assign something as being, well, we met or exceeded luxury that you're used to, then it's, well, that wasn't luxurious. I need more. I need more. There's always some reason to make it not luxurious to him, right? So he says, so that goes to my point. It costs to have similar comfort. It does cost, maybe, this is actually debatable, but I'll give him this point. It does cost to have similar comfort, but it costs extremely little, and that was my point. It's not that it's free, it's that it's cheap. He says, if you're suggesting that $1 million worth of coverage here isn't as good as free or minimum deductible coverage there is true, ha 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 ha, ridiculous. Well, I'm going to say, no, that's exactly what I'm claiming. And why would you lie about it when you know it must be true? That's why you have a ha 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 ha, Philly Ray. Okay, I don't know why he writes this, but I get what people are saying about where it sounds like he's from. So the thing here is that, one, the most important factor for comfort when it comes to healthcare is the fear of being able to get that healthcare when you need it. Nothing can possibly compare to this. So if I have $1 million of coverage in the United States, or I have public healthcare in Nicaragua, I have dramatically better rights and protections to my healthcare here in Nicaragua than I do in the United States. So if you're going to laugh, it is at the concept that $1 million of coverage, which maybe you haven't heard, but in the United States, it is very plausible that your health insurance company may deny you. You may have heard about this. It's kind of well known. I think it's been in the news a little bit of recent that there are a lot of people who get denied when they need to go. So you can have this $1 million of coverage, but it doesn't mean you have coverage. America doesn't have guaranteed insurance when you have health insurance in the United States. One, you have deductibles, you have minimums. This varies, right, depending on your plan. But the one thing you always have is the ability for your insurer to deny your coverage. You also have the cost of getting that coverage. And then you also have the cost of what that coverage is. So let's talk about that. So he talks about $1 million of coverage. In the United States, typically $1 million of coverage, as could be covered by someone who makes a few $100,000 a year reasonably, basically covers very little. It sounds great, right? It's a great trolling tactic to say $1 million of coverage. And of course, when you put it in that context, people overlook that most of the time, not some of the time, most of the time, you're going to have at least part of your plan denied. You're going to have to pay extra. You have the problem that you may not be able to get the care that you need because between your insurance and your medical facilities, they'll just deny it. I've had this happen. It's common, right? You have the problem that the thing that you're covering is elevated in price because of the coverage. You get $1 million of coverage, everyone colludes on the back end over time, raises the price, and suddenly you're having to pay $1 million for $50,000 worth of care. And so that insurance that you pay $1 million for, or you get $1 million plan, is only a $50,000 to $100,000 plan in real medical cost terms, and they still might deny it, and very likely will at least once in a while. It's a really big deal. It's really hard to come up with how he thought $1 million plan could possibly be seen as more comfortable than a public hospital plan here. And how much does $1 million plan in the United States cost unless you have massive deductibles? Probably quite a lot. So that's not comfort. If I have to pay for my healthcare, I'm not comfortable. If I have to be afraid every time I go in an ambulance, every time I go to a hospital, I'm not comfortable. If I have to be afraid that I'm not going to get the care I need, I'm not comfortable. If I die because I can't get the coverage I need, I'm not comfortable. If I have to receive that care without the guidance of good oversight, I'm not comfortable. These are all things that I have to worry about not getting in the United States. These are all things that are protected in the public free system here in Nicaragua. So yeah, I'm going to say straight up, 100% more comfortable in the public hospital here than in any private hospital I've ever heard of in the United States. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but they're not the ones that you're going to be able to afford or find. Now, what he's alluding to, what he's trying to pretend, is that the brightness of the room, the decorations, the ease of being wheeled around, the nice quality of the sheets, the strength of the air conditioning, things like that are comfort factors, and they are the quality and the variety of the food that comes in the evenings. Of course, all these things are comfort factors, but none of them added together could possibly approach the comfort of knowing you're going to be able to survive and afford your health care. Right? The idea that Americans even know what comfort is in healthcare is shocking. Right? So he's making this ridiculous claim that $1 million of coverage is actually meaningful in some way, compared to a place where you don't have to worry about that coverage. And we could make the same claim. Well, here you have like $1 billion of coverage because it's unlimited. You're just covered for whatever is needed all the time, and there isn't any denying, and there isn't any partial payments, and there isn't any surprises later, and there isn't any denying you because of coverage or anything like that. So if you do all that, you still have what I believe is a far and away, no possible discussion, more comfortable experience. Do you want to use the public hospital here now that we've established it is more comfortable than a $1 million coverage in the United States? The answer is very likely for most of you. If you have a $3,500 budget, no. If you have a $1,500 or below budget, easily the answer is yes, at least most of the time. But if you have a larger budget, $3,500 for sure, you're in such luxury zone that we would say no. You would just almost always default to using private health care here. Would you get insurance for it? In almost all cases, no. I'm not going to advise anyone as to whether or not they should have health care coverage or not. That is a very personal thing based on your availability of finances, your health care, and other factors. But there is not the need for it the way that there is in the United States. The U.S. creates a situation where insurance feels like something you need to have, and so Americans will just knee-jerk into, well, you gotta have coverage. But that is unique to the United States. Most countries either have some kind of coverage, but it's nationalized, so they don't have that kind of insurance feel, or they don't have it at all and they don't have to worry about it, and they're completely surprised by the fact that Americans, one, need it, and two, are so misled about how healthcare works around the world that they would just think that you need it. Of course, it's an option. Everyone understands it's an option. No one's going to argue with that. But is it a sensible option? In most cases, the answer is going to be no. Because why? One, because you have the fallback of the more comfortable than the American hospital system in the public healthcare. Of course, yes, they are dark. Yes, once in a while, they're not in the best condition. So those are being upgraded very quickly, though. We have amazing new hospitals coming online everywhere all the time. So this is a really good point to show just how good the hospitals are here. Most Americans I know who deal with the hospital systems here come back with, wow, I will never go to America again at any price. The fact that it's free here is irrelevant. It's so much better is why we want to do it. It's the quality of the healthcare that makes us excited about it, not the fact that it's so affordable. That's just icing, right? The quality is the cake. So Americans are going to very easily have this feeling like they have to do these things, but they don't make sense here. But if we want it to get better, and absolutely many of us do, for $3,500 a month, why not? Whoever spends anywhere close to that on healthcare in a country like this, you just never do. To Americans, it feels panicky. But I could easily spend so much money on healthcare. Sure, maybe, but I don't know anyone who's ever had to, right? There are exceptions, but they generally knew ahead of time that it was a real risk for them, that they were in a very specific risk category. The number of people who've actually experienced this where they're hitting large amounts of money where it would come close to paying insurance in the United States approaches zero for me. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Of course it could, but I've been through major medical events here, and the cost is rarely as much as 1 or maybe 2 months of insurance payments in the United States. If you have any concerns whatsoever that you would not have enough money in order to deal with a major medical event, simply start setting aside what would be payments for insurance instead of paying it and having it thrown away so that someone else gets that money and then they decide whether or not to dole part of it back out to you or not. So if you go private here, yes, you do have to pay under normal circumstances. That's absolutely fine because it's so incredibly cheap. We pay all the time. I use the example that I went in. I wanted an x-ray. It was not necessary, but I wanted to get one just for my own edification. So I went in, got an x-ray of my knee. I was out in 15 minutes. It was $20 at the private facility. That's a really good example. Now, an MRI is going to cost a few $100s, definitely. That's going to be more. This is just an x-ray. Right? But going in to see a doctor, $10. That's paying out of pocket for private. I can always go public for free, remember. But there are advantages to private. getting in really fast, being able to set my schedule, only being $10, having additional control of my healthcare. Absolutely, I'm willing to spend that extra money. I only spend a few $100s per year. We're a family of 5, with one of us being in retirement age and having been through 1 heart attack and 2 strokes, 1 mini stroke and 1 really severe stroke. And even with all of that, we don't go for insurance because it makes no logical sense when you break down the numbers. And in the events that we've had to deal with, have rarely spent very much money. When it was, now, a heart attack did not happen here. We don't have an example of that. The first stroke happened here. It was a few $100s. The major one was a few $1,000s. But a few $1,000s spent over a period of nearly 5 years, of 5 people. So that's 25 human years here in the country. And we have spent something like a cumulative $3,000 on healthcare. Break down that math. Now, that's anecdotal. You would need to do that for a lot of people. But 25 human years gives you a useful bit of information. And we use doctors semi-regularly and almost always private. I'm not sure we've ever used the public facilities ourselves, but our friends do. And Marcela, who's on the show, is going through oncology with the public system, and it's absolutely fantastic. Really impressive. And it's honestly really offensive to me that someone like Philly Ray, who clearly has never been to Nicaragua and has no interest in it, would make such a claim when they're doing such a good job for the people of this show and keeping her alive and getting her chemo and really doing an amazing job for free with really beautiful facilities and treating her great. And it's been just an amazing, impressive experience that is unlike anyone I know is getting in the United States. He then uses, so here's where he's going with that, right? So adding those costs, he doesn't say what those costs would be. The problem is he's saying you need American costs for Nicaragua, which just isn't true, to $3,500 alone isn't going to allow for it to work when food and housing is considered. And what I just said is it absolutely allows for it in every possible way. And it's honestly quite insulting to all the Americans that he's trying to play here to think that they're so clueless that they can't do the research or do the math and say, wait, everything is so much cheaper. No, of course, the medical is also so much cheaper. And there's no, if doctors are only making, $1,200 a month and the hospitals are like, obviously the money works that way. You admittedly make assumptions on what I mean. I don't think I did. Instead of sticking to what I expressly said, in which he didn't. And your budget is no car. Absolutely. Well, I did point out that you could get a car, but it wouldn't be smart because you don't need one here. Right, because this isn't America and we don't drive. The average Nicaraguan doesn't have a car. The average expat doesn't have a car. Of my expat friends, most of them don't have cars. They don't need them. They don't consider that a luxury because they don't want to have to deal with it. It's so great because you can just pay people to drive you. If you're on a budget around $3,500, you have chauffeurs, right? You have drivers for things. You don't need to have a car. He's thinking in this much more less luxury mindset. And so forgetting that more luxury sometimes changes how people work. So he's caught in this low thing here. He says, and your budget is no car, minimal outings. I don't know that I said minimal outings. That require public transportation? Yeah, because this is Nicaragua, just like Europe or New York City, Philadelphia, San Francisco, all places that I wouldn't have a car either. That's not very comfortable, I'd say. Well, now you're just being dishonest to try to make a point, and that's my point. It's all trolling, you're not really trying. But, so I want everyone to really see this, though, because we get a lot of these, and they have very similar tones and tactics, because there's a playbook that's being used, but I do like digging into these because they get so ridiculous. He says, the Fatima, I saw you post. Ha 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 ha, no. So Fatima houses is a zone, and there's some amazing houses up there for like $450. Absolutely beautiful. Go watch the videos for yourself and see what he's saying no to, because that by itself, you don't need to worry about the healthcare. You don't have to worry about the school things. None of these. If you see what he's saying, no, that's not comfortable. No one is going to buy his luxury off of that. Those houses are beautiful. $450, $500, $550, right? Big 3 bedrooms, big yards, beautiful spaces, gated communities, guarded 24/7. Chief of police lives in the community. Like, yeah. Yeah, he's really grasping at straws to come up with what luxury would be for him. For a family that has a basic standard of living, wouldn't find it comfortable to homeschool. Okay, thank you. Nearly all of us with kids here homeschool. And I homeschool when I was a 1%er in the United States. I had, when I was a C-suite on Wall Street, I did pretty good money. And we homeschooled. And it was a luxury because we wanted to spend time with our kids. We wanted them to have more educational opportunities. We wanted to have more flexible schedules. We wanted to do the right thing for them. So this is a personal attack, right? Clearly. And he knows that, right? He can see my videos. He knows we homeschool. He also knows that a lot of my viewers homeschool. And he knows that a lot don't as well. But he's clearly making an attempt to portray anyone who homeschools as doing so out of poverty, when in reality, most of the ones I know here do it out of excess luxury. They have the financial resources. They have the free time, because one of the things is often when you have a budget around $3,500 a month here, you also are able to do so on a single income. And so you have more time to homeschool, which again is a luxury, that you don't need dual incomes in most cases when living here to do these things. That's, to most Americans, considered a luxury that you don't need to work as much. Wouldn't find it comfortable to homeschool or skimp on AC like you suggested. Well, that's you. But he isn't here. And again, he doesn't know what the AC is, right? So there's all this, like, he's desperate. In America, we wouldn't do these things because we have to do, two people have to go to work, so homeschooling would be uncomfortable. Got it. We don't have the ability to cool parts of the house and cool different sectors really easily because we do central air. Got it. Right? It's different. But this isn't America, and he clearly has forgotten that. So he's really working hard to come up with how this didn't work. For anyone who looks at your video without prejudice, they will likely see that your own words show that $3,500 a month isn't comfortable, while at the same time seeing that your skewed attempts to frame this and that isn't very technical or effective. Ha 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 ha! So it is settled. $3,500 isn't comfortable. You have to homeschool, not have a car. I think you suggested no medical plan. You have to watch out on your AC usage. And you have to learn to live like a Nika, as if going to a new country and being yourself and adding that to the culture and economy isn't enough. I wish I was on my iPad and not my phone. Ha 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 ha! Wouldn't be so poor grammatically. Ha 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 ha! But just wanted to get the thoughts out after video. This was great gym content, though. Ha 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 ha! 1.5 was perfect. Ha 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 ha! That's literally what he said. So yeah, he definitely doubled down at the end. That just his presence. He expects his presence and his lack of integrating into a new place, his desire to copy America, not be luxury, right? He doesn't have luxury in the United States. He can't do these things. We've already established. Why would he be coming to Nicaragua if he didn't not like the United States? So we've caught him here, right? He's talking about coming to Nicaragua for some reason, presumably comfort, and finding that whatever he has in the United States isn't meeting his needs. So he's interested in moving. That's the supposition here. And now he's saying, if I can't replicate America and all the things that are uncomfortable or complex or expensive that I have to do in America because of America, right? This is not a negative on America. America has different weather than Nicaragua, has different roads than Nicaragua, has different everything than Nicaragua, so it has different needs. America has wide open spaces. There are single areas in America that are so large that driving across them without anything in between would be like driving across the whole of Nicaragua. So the need for a car in the United States is completely different. I grew up in the US, I had a car, and I needed one, and it was really awkward to use public transportation because in most of the US, public transportation isn't very good. But when I lived in New York City, I used public transportation and I didn't have a car. Why? Because that's how people live there, and that's how you live comfortably. It doesn't make sense. People who have hundreds of millions of dollars will sometimes not have cars, because why? It's just another thing to deal with when you don't need to. If you're not a car person, or you're not a driver, or you're not addicted to driving, which a lot of people are, so that's fine. But if you don't have those things, then the idea of owning a car isn't very pleasant and isn't a luxury. It's a millstone. Some people who love cars, and I like cars, so for me, owning a car is kind of a nice thing, but the financial stuff, yeah, it's a negative, and dealing with it, as I did this morning, my clutch went out, is a pain. Now, all that said, we have bought some cars recently, and we're going to be doing some episodes about buying cars on a $3,500 budget, just happens to be, so great. But the thing that I think is really interesting here, and he's glossing over very carefully, is that now we do have an episode where we talk about financing in the cars and some of buying, but we were able to buy a really nice family car. Nothing special, but a very comfy, modern, works great, reliable car for $20,000 US. That's total price, $20,000 US dollars, cash handed to the dealer, walk out with the car. You don't really walk out of the car, it takes about 2 weeks to actually get it. But that's another story. We'll talk about that. But that's how it works. Right, it's just understanding how it works. But $20,000. Can you get a new car with warranty from a major vendor in the United States for $20,000 that you'd actually be happy with and drive and be like, wow, I got a nice new car with all these features and Apple Play and all these things? I don't think so. We then bought, and we're going to talk about this, an SUV. We got a high-end SUV with all the luxuries and extra stuff for 26 something, basically 27, all in cash. Done. That's after tax. That's after title. That's after all those complicated things that keep giving you sticker shock as the price goes up and up and up. We're talking really nice vehicles at prices. I don't know anyone getting anything like that in the United States. When, we're just seeing, this happens to be the week when we saw that truck, it went viral, that an $80,000 American vehicle went from $80,000 to $100,000 this past week. And I heard there's some delays on that. It's coming back down. It may not be quite that high. But the point is that cars are super expensive in the United States, and people are talking about tariffs on cars so high that you can buy an entire Nicaraguan vehicle with just the tariff money in the United States. I don't think people are understanding how much cheaper even things coming from other countries are here in Nicaragua. Everything's cheaper. Even things we buy from the United States, from Amazon, shipped from Amazon in the US to Nicaragua. The most convoluted thing you could possibly imagine is sometimes actually cheaper than buying it in the United States. That's crazy, but that's how it works, and everyone overlooks that. And there was a discussion somewhere recently where I saw this. Someone was talking about, it's so expensive to buy, I don't know, it was some part at a hardware store. And we're like, so that doesn't make any sense. You went to it, there's a luxury place here. It's an American store, it's an Ace Hardware. And they went there and they're like, look how much more expensive it is than some price in the US. Now, first of all, that price in the US was pre-tax. The price here in Nicaragua was post-tax. So that's not a fair comparison. But that's how Americans talk about things. They say if something's $10, they say it's $10. They don't add the 7%, 8% tax to it. That comes later. So that's another 80 cents or whatever. But that adds up. In Nicaragua, if there's going to be an 80-cent tax, it's already in whatever price you're talking about. So, but in this case, we're talking about things a little bit larger. The numbers start to show up, and you start to notice when people are including it in one case and missing it in another. But importantly, in one case, he was presumably getting a low price from the United States and finding what we here consider the silly place to shop because it's so expensive here. That's not really how people shop here. Of course, you can go somewhere in the US and get it really marked up as well. That's obviously possible. But here we can go look at the same store that he was buying it at in the United States, most likely, buy it from them and ship it here and possibly get it for the same price that he can get it in the United States. Yes. We will have a delay in getting that. It will take longer to get here. We have to plan better. Absolutely, there are negatives. It is not 100% perfect. Not everything is better in Nicaragua. Duh. But if you're looking at those prices, it is super rare that we have something that costs more than in the U.S. There are things. We talk about it with the appliances. Most of our appliances come from the U.S. A lot of specialty food items that are only made in the U.S. Yes, obviously they're going to be more expensive here. You don't have to ship them in the U.S. and they expire or whatever. There are things. But when you're talking about equal things, almost always they're cheaper here, right? We can get a wrench in the US, we can get a wrench here. Wrench here will be cheaper. We can get cereal in the US, we can get cereal here. Cereal here will be cheaper. But if you get the one that was made for the US, sold in the US, so all the cost of the US is in it, and then you ship it here, of course it's going to be more expensive here because the US cost is already in it. But now, with the way that things are going, actually a lot of those appliances and other things are no longer coming through the U.S. They're now coming direct, and our costs are actually lower. So things where you were surprised in years past that prices were not a lot higher, but 5 to 10% higher here is going away. And now we're probably going to be looking at quite a bit lower, not because we're getting cheaper per se, but because the United States is getting so much more expensive. And that just is unfortunate, but that is reality. So we're actually moving towards a more dramatic, cheaper luxury lifestyle here than before. All right, someone did pop in and say, $3,500, you can live like a king. Some of these I'm reading live. And someone said, a rental of 3 bedrooms in Leon is $100 a month. yeah, you can live on 3,500. I actually don't know where you can get a rental for that cheap with 3 bedrooms, but in theory you can in the barrio. But that is really pushing it. But getting a 3 bedroom for 200, absolutely, right? And we have one. So this isn't some pretend thing. We actually have one of these. We've shown them on the show. You can see what they look like. Are they fancy? No, but they're also bare. If you move into one at $200 a month, you can fix it up however you like. Of course, when you're renting them at 200, no one's been taking care of them, so they don't look great. They don't do show condition here in the way that people do things. But when you go look at a place that someone has actually been living in and putting some time in, you can have nice gardens, you can paint the walls, you can decorate. These places can look quite nice. In many cases, the bathrooms are still a little bit difficult. So that's why you want a more expensive place when we're talking luxury, is often because the bathrooms are not unusable, just less comfortable, and you can't decorate around that. So I understand that if we're trying to get down to 100, 200, even 300, we're getting into pretty cheap areas, and you're making it difficult to call it luxury. But once you're spending about $350, you have access to pretty luxurious by American and Canadian standards. You still have to decorate it and stuff yourself, but you're able to get with that rent. So that's just an important framing. All right, now he keeps going, which this is all before I jumped in at all, so just jumping in. For you guys, Scott is so hyperbolic and poor at skewing and framing things that it's not tough at all to carve up his post. He wants a father of 4. Now, just to be clear, he did fix this. A father of 2, a family of 4. He just not in this post. A father of 2 to tell his wife to move internationally. So first of all, no, I don't think that a man should just tell his wife that they're moving internationally. I think they should discuss it together and rationally decide that they don't like being not Americans, and then they shouldn't come to places where they're not going to live in an enclave, right? And if they are, then they should honestly admit that they're not coming down and looking at Nicaraguan prices or the prices wherever they're going. They're looking at enclave prices of the specific community that they want to live in. So I would not want him to be an authoritative ruler of his family, and I wouldn't want them to falsify to themselves and make irrational decisions. No. What I would want them to do is talk, discuss, and if they actually want to live in Nicaragua, move to Nicaragua and take part in how much cheaper it can be. I would not want anyone with his attitude to come to a country that I live in and come here and be like, we're here to be Americans and they should be thankful for that. If you have that attitude, I'm going to be straight up. I don't want you here. Now, I don't get to make that call, so you can still come and be obnoxious here and be like that. But don't expect the other expats to appreciate it, and certainly don't expect Nicaraguans to appreciate it, and you are not doing anyone a favor. You do not get to have that attitude. You certainly don't get to ask me to pretend that you're being helpful, because you are not. This is the thing that people complain about, and the reason that so many people honestly post were afraid of turning into Costa Rica. Not because Costa Rica is a bad place, but because so many North Americans have come down with that attitude, and they have money to throw around, and they think that that gives them some right to pretend that their presence or their culture replacing, overriding what is here is good, when in reality the question is, how acceptable is it? Okay, to ask his wife to move internationally and not have a school. We did not ask that. We just gave pricing, and he doesn't like the pricing. To go to, remember, they had free public in the U.S., free public in Nicaragua to go to. We had lots of options. We've covered this. Not have a school to go to like they likely do in state. Remember, we still have our state school here. So he's seen the videos where we talk about how we still have Texas state education here, meaning they will likely do not homeschool. I don't know why they likely don't homeschool. A lot. The percentage of the expats who move here who report that they have always homeschooled is easily 50%, which completely shocked us. And it's anecdotal, but we ask a lot, and it comes up all the time. He says, to not have a car with the freedom to travel. Now, just be clear, not have a car is not something I asked. It's just not a budget item that you need. But you also have the freedom of travel because we have public transportation. I can travel all over the country without a car. Why would you ask your family to not do that? If they wanted to travel, why would you block them just to do so? And to not use the AC freely like they do in the States. Again, we never used our AC freely in the States. That's why we had an $800 bill and had to be like, stop running the AC all the time, right, in the States. Not have a full pallet of food for budget purposes. No, mostly it's just because variety is tough to get here. Like they do in the States. You'll notice he's got something he's doing here. not have the top shelf internet being that gotta have the top shelf internet. What does this mean to you, Philly Ray? Because we have a lot of videos where we talk about people getting scammed with internet scams and selling things that make absolutely no sense and do nothing. Being that 4 phones, various other devices can obviously be a drain, etc., etc., etc. No, phones aren't a drain. So that's not how it works, right? You get the amount of internet that you need, and you only use as much as you can possibly pull. One, we did in the budget give all 4 of those phones super fast 5G service all month long. We don't think that's necessary in most cases, but we definitely put it into the budget. And we also put in high-speed internet for the home into the budget. What we said we wouldn't normally recommend is getting business class internet. So, are you, Philly Ray, trying to claim that in the US you're getting business internet and not home internet? You're not getting, Comcast or Spectrum or AT&T or those. You're calling up commercial carriers and getting special custom fiber run? Because that's what we talked about in the video. He's conveniently acting like he hasn't seen the video and guessing where you'd have to make budget cuts. I know maids are common there, but I never suggested it was mandatory. No, but it was part of keeping the cost low, because instead of going out to eat all the time, you can have a maid, a level of luxury you wouldn't have in the United States. That was the point. I never suggested anything was mandatory. Nope, you've listed several mandatory things that you had suggested before. The whole point here is you made mandatory things. If they don't have school, if they don't have a car, if they're not paying insurance, he doesn't care what the healthcare is. He's only concerned about the insurance of the healthcare. Notice that. The only thing absolute of any real relevance was that I said that $3,500 wasn't comfortable, which was just a lie. And he knows it's a lie, right? And that's the thing. We've got a couple people who've been coming in and lying about this because they're trying to promote something or feel good about spending lots of money or something. I don't know if they're just looking to disparage the people who live here, if they're just trying to feel good about how much money they can spend. But this is a trend I don't like, that someone asks, what can I live on? And then when they find out, someone else mocks them for not having a larger budget. But as a human being in a similar environment as the gentleman with the original question, I have a ballpark idea of what comfortable might be. I believe you do not, or you're just dishonest about it. One of the two. Your video was so long that you contradicted yourself when you started using my name in an effort to prove some pie-in-the-sky points. I don't know what that is. You didn't point them out, and I have no idea. The bottom line is a family of 4 can't send their kids to school. No, we proved that you can. Live freely at home with AC. You can't waste it, just like in the States. Food choices, etc., and move around the region of the country they are in comfortably under $3,500. Absolutely all those things you can do. No possible question. Saying private school doesn't get you any points. Ha 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 ha! An American family simply wants to send a kid to school many times. I have no idea what this means. Saying private to say an elitist is weird. No. If you take private school as a requirement, you're an elitist. Period. Saying private that $1 million medical nonsense hurts your credibility. Okay. Trying to make me seem ignorant when I'm not is petty and playing to your fans. Ha 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 ha! I'm hoping this is entertaining. I know farmers, folks living on SSI, call center workers, a lawyer, a few hotel owners, a couple street vendors, barbers, etc., etc. So again, your attempt to frame me was inaccurate and petty. You have yet to show a family of 4 could live comfortably for $3,500. Respectfully, the homes you show that I've seen are no bueno for a family of 4 on budget. They needed repairs. Nope, I guarantee there were some that absolutely did not need repairs. Furnishings. Do you buy homes in America with furnishings? What are you talking about? Etc., etc. Show us the near luxury home for $500. I have. It's in Fatima. Go watch it. Right. We'll do our best to link it, but we're pretty bad about that. So these are some pretty extreme things. So one, we're looking at long-term rentals that are unfurnished when you're renting a house. People have rented houses from me. They do not come furnished, right? They rent them for thousands of dollars, right? And they don't come furnished because that's not normal in the United States. You can get furnished places rented. Absolutely. That's an option, but it's not the norm. And you certainly don't expect it when you're coming in on budget, especially when the furnishings themselves would cost more than the budget. But you could buy your own furnishings that make sense for you, and then it's much cheaper for reasons that we have have videos that have gone into all of this. None of this is a surprise. None of this is weird. None of this is different than in the United States. So there's obviously, he's working really hard to kind of find areas where it feels plausible, but it requires this super elitist American cultural repetition thing to be like, in America, we would have this problem. So you must replicate the problem and then replicate the solution in Nicaragua. But what he's missing is we don't necessarily have those problems. So forcing the solution on top of the cost of Nicaragua is how he's trying to make $3,500 not look viable, which is very similar to what we've seen before when people are trying to make this tactic, when people are trying to come in with what could you live on and being like, no, here's the luxury we feel you have to have. All right, before we wrap up for the day, I know this wasn't the happiest of conversations, but sometimes it has to happen. There are people who are going to use their money, who are going to use their position of power, who are going to do whatever to mock us. And it's something that I think is important that I stand up for because we have a platform, we have a spot where we can point out that these things are not good. This is not good behavior. This is not how you make a difference. And so I hope that in the end, for the majority of the audience, that this is supportive and meaningful, and you see it as the protection, as the calling out people who would harm you if they get the opportunity as much as we can. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. And as always, share on social media, tell your friends and family. I will see all of you tomorrow.